So let's look at lesson 20, implementing cybersecurity resilience. Having a good reliability or availability when it comes to a company is very important when you're doing a lot of business online. So having your servers being available at any given time to your customers around the world um, could be a main factor for a lot of these companies. The main one that sticks out in my mind is Amazon. But if you wanted to say, hey, what other companies, web companies that are reliant on availability, look at your social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter. Look at Netflix. Whenever Netflix is down, think about you may be asleep at that time, but think about on the other side of the world who's up and trying to contact a movie that they want to watch on Netflix. And having that availability is a very important factor when it comes to uh, companies that run strictly off of cloud-based resources. So, all in all, I want you guys to take a look at this slide and see that the availabilities of the 7 nines um, here at the top is what you aim to shoot for. Meaning, out of the whole year, you're probably down for maybe 32 seconds. 32 seconds. And that's, is only achieved by so many companies that have it seems like an unreal amount of redundancy when it comes to data centers around the world. Think about Google. When was the last time you tried to go to google.com and you could not reach it? Now, Google has you have seen YouTube down from time to time, but it's a lot of times where you could just, hey, if YouTube's down, you could just check to see if Google's down as well. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. So just keep those things in mind. When it comes to high availability, that means that we're going to keep our servers some type of way of keeping our web services online for our customers to reach. Now, of course, when we're talking about running these servers and these data centers constantly around the clock, you would think, maybe at some point in time, individual machines may go down. Individual machines may break at some point in time, and that is true. But a lot of these devices, they have a redundancy built onto them, and so while they have the load going off of one part, whenever that part frails out or it breaks, it automatically fails over into the backup part, and then you get a notification saying, hey, we need to replace this power supply here on the server. So you want to, as a smaller acting type of security professional, you want to make sure that your servers are on a redundant power supply, give that will give you enough time to say, hey, I can leave for today, and if the power supply on if it breaks or if it drains out for whatever reason, it can have a backup supply, keeps power going to uh, our main server that supplies our customers, and then I can come back in the morning and replace the one that's broken. And now it can become my backup, and the one that's already running it can be my primary. So that main mindset needs to be the same way when it comes to networking as well. So not just having one router, as I stated earlier, uh, stating having one router or one switch. Um, Maybe we need to have a whole different internet provider to give us to stand as a backup, just in case we need to fell over into them. So okay, let's say for example, uh, Comcast is our internet provider and our business is running off of Comcast. But let's say if Comcast is having an outage that day, that means our business is having an outage that day. But say if we have Dish Network as a backup, and while it's not the same plan, it doesn't give us the same amount of bandwidth as our primary provider. it does give us enough bandwidth in order to keep our business running. So whenever Comcast goes down, we can automatically fail over safely into our backup internet provider and then continue to have business. So we want to think about it in that aspect. We also want to think about not just having one server or router or switch routing all the traffic, because now it becomes a single point of failure if those things come down. So in order to keep the good faith of redundancy going, we want to make sure that we have multiple devices ready to actually take on that load if necessary. But it gives us enough time, and it gives us a probability factor of saying, hey, what's the odds of both of our routers being broken at the same time? Now, if that's the case, now we look at a disaster, right? But if it's just regular operations and one router goes down, but I have another router that can carry both loads, it gives me enough time to get another router in, configured, mounted, and then have that traffic, balanced off between the two. Bringing that redundancy from the networking side down to our servers now, we want to make sure that we understand our RAID disk when it comes to creating a redundancy of our data, making sure that our data is not only just put on one machine, but is spread out across an array of disks, right? So it's copied bit by bit from one disk to another. And this creates a way of giving us a backup of our information and not relying on one single server to house all of our information. Now we talked about the networking redundancy server side with RAID, our RAID system. Now let's talk about how we can go to a local storage and create a redundancy right there. So we can have a storage area network, which is a SAN, or a basically, to where I think about it, is more of a external hard drive that's on the network. So I think of a place where, if you've seen in a lot of businesses, if you go to your folders, they may call it the network drive, where you may, no matter what PC you log into, when you go and look for that folder, that drive, it has the same information no matter where you go, but it's not physically linked to your PC or your laptop. So this is a storage area network, and it's basically a hard drive that's sitting somewhere with your routers and your switches, and we use that as a place to store files where maybe other people from other departments go in to gather that information, because I can't directly send it to you, or maybe too big to send through an instant message such as a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom chat, right? So we can use that. We can also use virtual machines to use the hard drive space in there to save information and keep that redundant. We can also use any kind of cloud provider, such as a box.com or Google Drive. I forget Microsoft's, I think it's OneDrive for Microsoft, but the storage unit is kind of like a home or a cloud version of the SANS network, where it's a hard drive space that we can use to set our files out there in the cloud, quote unquote, and then now we can go to any PC, log into that cloud provider, and then pull down that information that was saved into that cloud environment. So when we're performing at the workstation level of a backup, we want to make sure that we cover our short terms and our long terms when it comes to where to pull backups from. Sometimes we can do a recovery of that file right there on the desktop, the actual workstation, and then that's more likely going to cover your short time terms. But then on the long term, we may need to go and contact a system administrator to pull that type of files away from a server and then have them reinstall or reposition back on our hard drive uh, for longer, anything maybe longer than 30 days removed from our workstation. So we want to make sure that we have that long-term retention as well. Also, you want to make sure that certain data you just do not want to delete or discard of if you need to actually, if regulation says that you need to have it for so many years on file. So make sure that we are just not so eager to get rid of information. Make sure that we have it for a set amount of time that we're going to keep it, and make sure our customers know that we're going to keep their information for a certain amount of time. And a good example of that is when you fill out an application, certain companies will let you know that even if you're not selected for the job, the position, they will keep your application on file for the next 2 years. And that means that, you know, all your personal information that you have provided on that application, they will keep a record of it for the next 2 years. Now, when working with virtual machines, you'll hear this term a lot called snapshots. And snapshots is just a kind of like a frozen moment in time of that machine state. So if you have a virtual machine running and we want to take a snapshot of the configurations at that point in time, we can do that and then create a check-in point or a revert back point, right? And what that means is that let's say if we shut down that virtual machine for the today's end of business day, and we want the next day for it to start off at that snapshot point of view, we can set that as the revert point back to a new starting point. So it always starts back at that snapshot's point of view, and um, it doesn't care about any changes that were made after that snapshot or before that snapshot. Well, after the snapshot. Let me correct that. Anything before the snapshot that is made up to that actual snapshot, then it's saved. But everything afterwards um, will not be saved. So if you made any kind of configuration changes that you wanted to actually show after the fact, then you probably need to make a new timestamp, a new snapshot, and then have it revert back to that timestamp. Now you have different types of media backups that we can use in order to back up information. Uh, our most common one will be our hard drive, our disk, that's directly installed into our workstations. But like I said before, we can also use the network attached disk or a storage, which is called a NAS, and it's a way of um, being able to drag and drop your files or attach large files to a network storage and being able to um, go to any other workstation that's on that network and being able to pull that information down. Uh, kind of an older type of backup storage is a tape, where it's kind of like a old cassette tape, um, and it's able to write the data there. Of course, you can see the problem with old type of ribbon tape is that it's subject to break or actually the technology is just being obsolete now to where especially when you have things such as the cloud um, that can be accessible from anywhere and everywhere at any given time. Whereas in tapes, you probably those are physical attributes that you need to have stored away in the proper building with the top proper temperature in order to not damage the physical item. So just old technology, but with that new implementation of the cloud, we are slowly moving over our information from those tapes into the cloud. This slide here shows a list of how we will want to go about restoring order when it comes to maybe implementing a disaster recovery from the ground up. So we're going to power on our delivery systems and then go into the infrastructure, actually putting our routing network in place, as well as once we put that routing network in place, we want to make sure that our critical systems are also talking to each other and routing proper packets throughout the network. So we want to make sure that everybody's talking correctly. When I mean everybody, I mean the critical systems in that infrastructure. And then you want to go move on to your network security appliances. That'll be um, your IPSs, your IDSs, that could be your firewalls, things that are providing a security border around that infrastructure. Then we want to go in and put in some more critical network servers, making sure that we have correct failover, redundancy again, and then we want to make sure that we have a back end and a middleware to verify data integrity. That means that um, with the data that we have moving forward back and forth, that we want to make sure that we have a validation that the data has not been changed without unauthorized authority. So what we want to think about is more DLP systems, going in there checking to make sure everything is right and everything has a high integrity factor. um, Going into front end applications, what are we using to actually uh, perform tasks, daily tasks? What are we actually doing to provide services to our customers? And then we want to make sure that we want to set up our client workstations, devices, and have their client browsers, giving them access, but making sure that we have them routing through the proper channels in order to monitor that traffic. So I talked a little bit about persistent and non-persistent machines. Kind of this goes into our virtual machine aspects, and non-persistent means it has that snapshot type of a feel where it's always going to revert back to a point in time where any configurations after that snapshot has been made, it doesn't show up in that beginning state. So this is what I mean when we say non-persistent virtual machines. Every day when you come and log into this workstation, it's always going to show the same applications. It's going to have the same files on it, and it's even if you was to save files to the desktop, the next morning those files will be gone. They will not be saved. It would only show what we have at that snapshot in the beginning. Now that kind of goes into the configuration management. Now, when you think about configuration management, you want to think about how we're actually setting up workstations, virtual machines, firewalls, switches, and routers. These are the actual baselines and the actual rules that we want to put in place to actually make sure that we're operating our assets in a proper way. And this is, it's not necessarily a baseline across the industry. It's more about what fits your business the best, and then how are we able to convey that across all of our systems. Now think about, you have different systems made by different vendors, and they may do perform different functions. Well, we need to make sure that the configuration management all coincide with each other and play nicely with each other, right? So we don't want to make sure that, well, if I don't want to block this type of traffic with this appliance, that I don't bring in another IPS that will actually block the traffic that I told this one device not to. So we want to make sure that we all have a kind of a baseline, but a working factor to where all the configurations work in harmony when it comes to moving packets across the network and within the network. Asset management is very important to understand what's in your environment and having an inventory of what leaves the environment and what comes into the environment. If I can have a good idea of what's in my environment, I can have a better idea of how to secure it. I can have an even more understanding that once I see something that's not supposed to be there, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So asset management, always having some type of inventory, and you kind of want to have an inventory check, maybe I would say quarterly, but I think the standard is yearly, annual, and I would still say that you would need a up to date list, and then when new hires come on or new management may come in, they can understand the landscape, and they can understand all of the devices that in we have responsibility for. Now, in some companies, some big companies, they have this thing called change control or change management, and this is where we make where if there's any kind of configuration changes on our systems, routers, switches, anything that's real detrimental to the company, that if I change the setting, it could actually affect everyone in the business. We want to have a system in place to understand the change, make sure our business owners understand the change, and then they will probably need to vote if the change is needed. Um, and you, as a security professional, it's not your job to actually say, hey, we will do this. It's your job to actually suggest that we do this. And you give them a, a real good reason on why we should go about patching this system or changing this configuration to block this type of traffic, or to make sure that we have this configuration turned off in order to allow that traffic in. These type of changes, even though you may have you may have a thinking that it's the best thing to do, it may be a hindrance to the business. And those business owners need to make a decision on if that change needs to happen, and if they're equipped to deal with any kind of issues that may arise. So this is where we have change management, and you'll have a board of people who will see this type of request come in, and then they will vote or make any type of changes, or say yay or nay, basically say yay or nay to if they want this change to happen. And also, this needs to be documented for whatever changes that you do make, right? And so whenever we have a change made, we understand the changes. Everyone understands the changes. It's documented, and there's a rollback plan in order to understand if it doesn't go well, how do we get out of the state that we're in back to a known good state. Now, a lot of times in disaster recovery, you'll see a lot of focus being shown when it comes to site resiliency, and that's setting up a hot site, a warm site, or a cold site. So the difference is that these are all kind of places where we can have set up, and it's a mirror image of what we actually do at work, at our primary source of business, right? But it may be in another state, it may be all located on the cloud, but the difference is that a hot site is ready to go. Is it may be, if it's a building that's already furnished with internet connection, computers. It just needs the personnel, the actual people, to go in and continue to work. That's a hot site. It is a one-for-one match. It has all the applications there. The setup of network configurations is already in place. This is a ongoing type of a site, right? So whatever changes we make in our real world, our everyday site, we're going to make that changes to the hot site. Now, a warm site may be a little bit different. It may be a building that has internet connection, but we don't have any desks for anybody to sit at. It may take maybe 12 to 24 hours for us to actually be up, whereas a hot site is maybe 1 or 2 hours, right? But a warm site may take a day, maybe two, to actually set up, have everybody move over, and then actually get operations moving again. A cold site, on the other hand, is going to be maybe just a building, and then we'll take it from there. And you're probably looking at anywhere from 48 hours to I want to say a week, maybe 2 weeks in order to get back up and running. But then you really need to understand what type of business that you're running to where you can afford to be out of work or out of you can afford not to get any revenue for 2 weeks, and still be able to get back up after 2 weeks and then be able to continue business as normal. So just keep those things in mind when it comes to a hot site, warm site, and a cold site. So I touched on this a little bit earlier when I was talking about the single point of failure, having that diversity, and it creates a defense in depth, right? So whenever you have, let's say you want to make a Microsoft shop, or better yet, a Apple shop. Everybody in there has a Apple, from MacBook Pros to iMacs to um, Apple servers, Mac servers. We got Apple phones. Everything is on a iOS platform. The problem with that is that if iOS has a vulnerability that affects all of their products, then the business has created is one big um, uh, point of failure until Apple pushes out that patch. They pushes out that update for us to actually go about and get and then download and install. We are pretty much vulnerable to this risk that has arisen. That's why we want to keep a diversity in the type of software that we get, what type of appliances that we get. Just because we buy a firewall from Symantec, we don't want to make sure that our endpoint protection is the same company. Maybe we want to have something different. Now, it is important that these software, they talk to each other and they play nice, because I've seen somewhere where uh, if you could be so diverse to where none of the applications really kind of talk to each other and actually integrate with each other well. And so that will go in more deeper into actually vetting out your vendors to make sure that they can talk to other vendors. Um, but you also want to keep in mind that diversity creates a defense in depth. If an attacker can say, "Hey, I know how to get into Cisco routers," okay, cool, but then he has to deal with a Palo Alto firewall. So it's not necessarily his forte. It creates a boundary for him. It creates a more hurdles to jump over in order to get the prize. So finally, we want to talk about deception and disruption strategies. Um, you don't have to necessarily be on the offense all the time, or I'm sorry, on the defensive all the time. Sometimes you can actually apply some offense and attack back, so to say. And the more important, or the one that you want to be more concerned with, is the use of honeypots, honey nets, something that we put on the network that makes it look real attractive to a hacker. Maybe we put some files out there, some folders out there, and label them to be um, some type of HR documents that should be um, confidential, and we're putting it out there to say, hey, basically, come look at me, come search, come open this document, see what you wanna see. Is this what you want to see? Is this where you want to go? And you leave a workstation out there like that. Let's just picture in your mind just having one separate workstation that doesn't have all the defenses set up on it, and it's out there on your network. Well, we want that attacker to see that workstation, that server, and we want them to attack it. That way we can have some type of analysis about it. We can see how they're actually attacking this machine. What are their tactics that they like to do? How does the malware work? Does the malware stay dormant for a couple of days and then it becomes active? Will it attack if will it stay dormant if it knows that it's in a virtual machine environment? Um, so we set these things up in order to create a offense for us. but it also creates a research value for us as well. So now we can see, okay, this is how they are doing things in the wild. This is how we can protect ourselves against other attackers. So let's go ahead and talk about lesson 21, physical security. So let's, throughout our whole course, we've been talking about a lot of things that were either policy based, something written, or something that was a configuration setting, something that we couldn't actually touch, so to say. And physical security is the total opposite of that. This will be your security guards, your fences, your door locks. These are the things that we actually can go to Home Depot and apply these type of security settings in order to keep intruders out from places that they don't need to be or where they're not authorized to be. And a lot of this starts at the beginning of planning how you want your business to lay out. Of course, if you're a security manager coming on to a new corporation, maybe you don't get the power to actually say, "Hey, I want fences put up and barbed wire put at the top of those fences, and I want a security guard 24 hours." But you get to, let's say, tell people where they should go or what will behoove them to be in this spot and away from certain doors or away from certain windows to stop the physical nature of someone um, shoulder surfing or having the event of a social engineering attack happening and then the intruder being able to get to an apartment that they shouldn't have been able to get to. So you do have that aspect to it. But if you do have the opportunity to actually put in some outer physical controls, fencing is a great way of putting up a barrier around your property or the corporation that you want to protect. Chain link fence is more common. And then I kind of made a joke about having a barbed wire fencing at the top, but that barbed wire extra feature creates more of a harder task for someone to actually want to climb over and then um, take the beating of getting over the barbed wire at the top, and then to get in that's one way, and then they have to leave out the same way. So um, it's always nice to have those type of features if they're available. Lighting in dark areas that's around the parking lots is also things that you want to keep in mind. Seeing if there's blind spots in your parking lot or around the perimeter of your corporation. Do we want to put up floodlights, motion detector lights around there? Do we want to put up any kind of cameras that can pick up motion? They turn on whenever they see motion, and then they capture the footage. So these are the things that we want to keep in mind when it comes to laying out the physical parameters of our building. Then we want to make sure that when it comes to the physical doors that's inside our building, what type of locks are we putting on them? Are we going to make our employees wear badges that have chips in them that whenever they need to uh, go into a certain floor or hallway or into a different department, will they need an access badge in order to get into that department? A good way of thinking that that's a access control, thinking that, hey, not everybody needs to go into the security department that's in the corporation. So why don't we give everyone a badge, and then on those badges we give them access control on to what floor they can get onto. Now you can go to the break area, you can go to the bathrooms, of course, and the human resources area, but let's just say the executive floor room, IT, and the maintenance room is off limits. All network closets are off limits. Only people who have these job titles will have that access to those type of resources. So that's another way of creating not just a defense in depth, but a access control as well. What do you have access to based off of what type of position that you hold? But now that we're on saying that we need these cards, these access cards, and given to every employee, we stand a risk of having people clone those type of cards or making some type of duplicate of it and trying to see if those things will scan the same way and let the assets in. So we want to make sure that we have a unique card, and we also have it to where we check our assets whenever we do have people scan in. So whenever if you are to see the console to see when people are using their cards, see if you see any other card pop up that's not supposed to be on your system. This goes back to our assets management, making sure that we understand the type of devices that we put out. Everything that we put out, we need to be accounted for. Therefore, it makes it easier for us that if we have 500 cards out there and we see 10 different new cards, either we are not on our case when it comes to new employees, 10 different new employees, or there's 10 new intruders that's not supposed to be on our property. So I kind of got mentioned motion detection when it came to having blind spots in your parameters around your building. You can also go with noise detection if hears any kind of loud screeching or hits a certain decimal point, then it'll send an alert to the recognized authorities. Um, you also have the famous of course, the famous circuit cameras. These are your typical cameras that's mounted up, and they are hardwired into a box that shows on a monitor for the security guard. These are reliable, but may not be the best to actually um, give a good showing of who's on the actual videotape, right? And it could be easily cut since they're hardwired, and it's not necessarily so great to monitor from a remote session. So you've 9 times out of 10 you have to actually be there to watch these monitors in order to see what's going on. So just keep that in mind. So, if you're not able to watch those video cameras on a 24-hour basis, we can always get our security guards, hire a security guard to actually do um, a parole of the perimeter, as well as watching the surveillance cameras to make sure that there's not any type of illegal activity or suspicious activity going on after hours or during business hours, and making sure that they're up to date and trained on the proper actions that they need to take when it comes to seeing any type of suspicious action. Keep in mind too that when you're dealing with security guards and you're doing your annual disaster recovery test or security awareness training, that you train your security guards as well on the policies that you want. Um, is too easy for a hacker to just pull a social engineering attack on a security guard that's not aware about who's coming in for that day or who's supposed to be in the building when it comes to a vendor. So I can pose as a person who's coming to fix a router in a closet, and the security guard is worried about other things that's on the outside of the building, not necessarily what's going on the inside. So if I come to him with some type of urgency and I have the box in my hand and say, hey, I need to get in there and change this router out real quick. Can you help me out? Can you point me to the place? I know you got a key. This is very urgent. The business is going down. And I give him that urgency. They could easily fall for that type of social engineering attack, and then give them access to a unauthorized place. So we already talked about ID badges, but I want to talk about visitors who come onto the property, vendors. We kind of just came out of a scenario where the engineering attack just happened on our security guard, where I posed as a person who's going to fix their router. Well, if we train our security guard properly, he calms that person down, and he brings out the visitor tab, the visitor information that they need to sign in, and date, the time, and state their purpose of why they're there. And then we need to actually get an escort to follow that person up and maybe stay with that person. So in a lot of cases, we will ask that person, that vendor, who are you here for? And then that person is responsible for that person being in the business, the company. So they won't be able to go any place without that person guiding them to the certain floors that they need to be on, because they have the badge. Unless you want to give them a visitor's badge that maybe only give them access to the bathrooms or the break area, and that's it, and just to get out. But other than that, they will stay with that chaperone until their business there is done, and then they can leave. And so this goes into our secure areas. How are we securing our areas? How are we? What do we need to look at when it comes to um, securing our most valuable products and assets on the corporation's property? How do we want to have a badge only lock for our server room, or do we want to have a physical key lock that actually, maybe only 5 people have keys, a pair of keys to? Do we want to have locking cabinets for our servers, kind of like here in this session here, that yellow cage that's around that those servers? Those are, kind of thinking about a defense in depth. You have to actually get into the building, but then not only are you in the building, and you probably had to sign paperwork or get some type of authorization to get in there. Now you can't really get to the server unless you have the keys in order to get through that cage. So these are, defense in depth products that we want to think about when implementing physical security to our products. Now, in the Security Plus exam, they want you to know about hot owls and cool owls, and that's when we're dealing with server rooms. Um, they set it into the physical security part of it, but I don't think it needs to be here. But since it's here, we're going to talk about it. So is how we want to a hot owl and a cold owl is how we want to situate or set up our server room in order to have the best airflow in the server room. So as we all know, devices, when they run a long time, they get hot. Fans come on, trying to cool down that CPU once it's working, right? So if you think about a big server room, you have a lot of PCs there that are running at the same time, creating heat, and they all create heat. Um, and it could be that if we don't have our servers positioned correctly, we could create a denial of service on other servers that may become too hot and then automatically shut down, right? So we want to make sure that we have everybody facing the same way to have the heat go out in one direction. That's what you call a hot owl. If everybody's back of the PC is facing one way, that owl is hot. But on the opposite side, that's where we want our ventilation and our air conditioner vents to be. We're going to call that the cool side, to constantly keep that side cool and every device cool and operational throughout the day. So that's the difference when it comes to the hot owl and the cool owl, and making sure that we have a proper airflow and keeping our devices safe and constantly working. So here's an illustration of what I was just talking about when the hot and cool owls. As you see here, where the guy is plugged into the servers, That's the front of the servers. This is where you're gonna see your buttons of the front of the server box, and then on the back side, that's gonna be where the heat comes out, and the fan on those boxes pushes that heat out into that owl. Now, if you look into the middle owl, that owl, uh, the back of those PCs are pointing at the back of the front rows servers. So it creates an owl where both sides are pushing out hot air to one side, and the cold sides are facing each other, creating nothing but cool air. And that's, like I said, either we want our ventilation or our air conditioner vents to either come up on that front side from the top or come down from the bottom of the floor and actually come up that way. And that way it keeps everything nice and cool and running and creating more availability for our customers. Now, in these server rooms, if we're talking about hot owls and cold owls, it's almost kind of natural to think about what type of fire suppression we want to have. Um, it has been cases where data centers or network closets and centers, they actually catch on fire. And so when they catch on fire, we don't want to use water, right? Or maybe we can't afford it. We have to. We can't afford something like a dry pot pipe or some type of gas to put out the fire. Maybe we need to use water, but then you might want to look into some type of redundancy when it comes to if that was to happen, you damage the PC for life, and now that data is lost forever. Maybe you might want to have that off in the cloud somewhere. But to bring it back to the slide, we want to make sure that our fire suppression and detection is on point. So these things get hot, could catch fire. It's a possibility. I'm not gonna say it's a low possibility, but it's a possibility, right? And so we want to make sure that our fire systems are up to date, that they contact the proper authorities. They contact the proper people who need to know that, hey, something's going on. And then when it comes down to water suppressants or having some type of gas, we will want to go with gas in order to save the data. But let's think about this. Whenever we shoot gas into that office or in that room and someone's in there, then we detriment that person's life. And so as a security professional, you always want to choose life over anything else. So in that case, if you're on the job and you have to make the decision, I would say go with a water suppression and risk you losing the data and not damaging someone's health concerns, because of some of these suppressions will take all the air out of the room in order to kill the fire. Some will put in some poison, some gas in order to kill the fire. But at the same time, it will kill anyone who's in that building, not in building, but in that room. So you want to make sure that you preserve the life first. I would say use a water suppressant and then have a backup or some type of cloud solution to always revert back if a fire were to happen. So destroying data, how do we want to destroy data? Physically wise, if we're talking about paper, we want to shred everything that we think is important. If it comes from our job, we're not throwing it away in waste baskets. They need to put it into a bin that we take out and we shred it, or we have a third party that comes and shred it. Now, when it comes to the third party shredding information, we need to vet that company out to make sure that they're not keeping information that we're putting on paper, right? And so we want to make sure we vet them out first. If we're talking about hard drives, if we want to, let's say if we're upgrading all our PCs and we're taking out old PCs and putting in new ones, we need to remove those hard drives, remove that memory, and then sell the casing of those PCs on eBay or Amazon or wherever you want to sell it at. But we want to take those hard drives and we either want to do a clean wipe of them, and that means having a wiper, some type of software that writes ones and zeros over everything. But remember, even if you do that and it happens maybe 7 or 8 times to overwrite everything on that hard drive to ones and zeros, it's still some type of software that's out there that could possibly still pull up the data that's buried way deep on that hard drive. So the only way to really kind of kill that information is to actually do physical destruction to it. That's shooting it, hitting it with a hammer, degaussing it, and that's taking two strong magnets and putting it on that hard drive, pulling the magnets within the hard drive apart. Um, or putting water on it, right? So you see a lot of times where on the TV shows, whenever the police are coming and they want to destroy everything in the in the in the house or whatever the case may be, and they have some type of computers, they throw water on it or they throw it into the microwave and they blow up the hard drive there. So that's the only way of truly getting all that data wiped off of that. But we don't want to just kind of go with our software and say, hey, yeah, we're going to wipe it like that. It still stands a chance of having recovery points to it. So this slide right here kind of goes into that software bit that I was saying about having sanitation tools that actually creates a disk wiping of the data on our hard drives. Again, I would stay away from that, but you need to know it for the exam to know that this is a way of doing it. Just think about it like this. Some businesses can't afford to buy new hard drives every time someone leaves or they want to upgrade. Sometimes we need to put those things back into a cycle. And so if that's the case, then yes, using a sanitation tool, to put it back into our reserve unit, we want to make sure we wipe that PC clean. And if it was the CFO's PC and we want to give it to a new IT technician, we can wipe it with a different sanitation tool and then give it to our IT tech, and we can feel better about, well, the information is still within our grasp, right? Now, like I said, if we're gonna sell that equipment, then we might want to go a different route of taking that hard drive out, that memory out, breaking the memory and destroying the hard drive.